It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you my friend, my colleague, and my co-author, Christine Heath. I've known Chris since 1985 when we crossed paths in what was the only training institute in the country at the time in the three principles. Way back then it was called Psychology of Mind, actually. And we've been in touch ever since. And she's been a godsend in my life. She's one of my most valuable and important teachers in my life. And so it's wonderful that this learning community can hear from Chris as well. She's got a great story about dating and meeting men, and she's been in a long-term relationship, and that's why she's helped me write the book, The Secret of Love. So Chris, would you like to tell us?
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. That's way too kind of you. I'm grateful to have you in my life, and if it hadn't been for you, believe me, I would never have written any kind of book on anything. So it's all on you that this is happening. So yeah, I'm kind of an interesting case in study because before I learned the principles, there's the before Chris and the after Chris. And the before Chris was very insecure when it came to relationships. And part of it, I think, is that my dad owned a theater. And so I grew up in the 50s watching these relationships of men and women on television where, you know, the woman would slap the man and he would come and grab her and kiss her and tell her, oh no, I'm so sorry, I love you. And there's this drama. So I kept waiting for that to happen in my life, as if there was some truth in that. But as I look back, I think, boy, that was really an illusion that I had about what relationships were like. And so then I went to college and I became a feminist. And at that point, I started to look at the roles that men and women played. And I thought that most men were affected by their thinking about power and control, and were treating women in ways that were less than positive. So to me, they looked like they were kind of creatures from the Black Lagoon, trying to figure out how to find one who wasn't impacted by these needs of power and control, and who actually thought women were equal to him. And so that was my kind of journey, but the journey was such that it made it look like I was looking for a man. That's how it looked to me. So I was looking for the right kind of man. I was pretty open. I was an equal opportunity employer at the beginning. I dated a lot of guys, and none of them were none of them stuck very long, maybe a year or two. But I dated a lot of people until I was older. So I was about 30 when I first learned about the principles. And as Lori said, the reason I even learned about the principles was because there was this training that was coming up on this new psychology. And I had been going to bars trying to meet men, and somehow, I don't know how this worked, but I kept finding men who were alcoholic in the bars. So deciding that perhaps I should change my tactic, because now I was like 30 years old, right? And so I really wanted to get married because my biological clock was clicking and I wasn't going to be able to have children and blah, blah, blah. So I had all this thinking in my head that made it seem really urgent that I find somebody to love me. At the same time, I had a lot of thinking that I wasn't lovable. So I kept finding men that to me looked like they didn't love me, and therefore I would break up with them. So I wasn't very successful. So I thought, well, maybe I should go to psychology conferences. I could go to this conference and check it out. Maybe there's some men there that are young and positive, and that would be a good mate. I'll try psychology conferences. So it was funny because I went to this training, and Dr. Roger Mills actually did the training. And he was there, and he was single. I found out as he talked that he was single. So I started thinking about dinner. Like, oh, okay, I could go to dinner with this guy. And I was totally predatory in my thinking about how I was going to land this date with this guy, you know. And so I thought in the morning I was kind of one of those people that was asking all the negative, combative questions. And he would answer me, and I couldn't understand it. But I thought everybody else in the room was smarter than I was. And so I figured they understood him. It was just me that wasn't too smart, that went over my head. So we had a break for lunch that day, and I was sitting with all the rest of the psychologists at my table, and we were basically bad-mouthing Roger, saying that everything he was talking about wasn't new, it wasn't different, it was the same thing, we were all doing the same thing. And I got up from the table, and I remember it was kind of one of those weird situations where it felt like when you're watching TV, and like everybody in the show stops except the main character. So like time stopped for everybody else except me. And I turned around and I looked at the table and I thought weird. And I turned around again and Roger was just coming out at the same time. So we met up walking out of the door of the restaurant. And he said to me, he said, I didn't answer your questions very well, did I? And I very cockily said, no, not really, you didn't. But now I'm thinking about dinner, right? So I think I should listen to him. So I started listening to him. I still didn't understand a word he was saying, but he had this feeling like melted butter, like velvet, like when you touch velvet and you stroke velvet. It was just this feeling that was so nice. So I went in the afternoon and I thought, well, if I'm going to get a dinner date with this guy, I better be able to converse with him about what he's talking about. So I started listening, and I remember what he said was that it was good to be positive, and focusing on the positive was a good thing. Now, at that time, being positive in therapy was, did I lose you, Lori?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I see change screens, but
okay.
I'm up on top.
Yeah, it's not. It says using Skype. Help.
Is that better? You can see both of us now. I just changed the speaker view.
Oh, well, whatever you did cut me off. I can't see you at all. I'm not.
Really? Can see you?
No, I'm totally gone here. I mean, you can hear me, but let me see if I can find it.
I can hear you. I can see you. This is one story I've not heard from you. I've heard so many stories from you. I never heard the Roger Mills story. That's really great.
I can't. It says launching Zoom.
Huh, that's really odd. Sometimes, is it on the bottom? You know, the bar on the bottom?
No, I see the stuff that Sam was doing. It's turned to the screen from Christine to Sam. Let's open this up.
That's funny. So it might be behind that.
Yeah, I can't.
Seems to me that happened once, and I could still see me behind.
No, I don't know. Should we go out and start again?
Well, I don't mind. I could start it again. It's up to you.
I just don't. It says launching. It says openzoom.us. It says it's not open on my end.
So weird. I see you.
Something you touched and I lost you.
Do you want to start again? I'm fine with that. We were only going about 10 minutes.
I got it. Okay. Now I got you. Okay, so should I go back a little bit and just start with this?
Yeah. You were talking about Roger and he.
Okay, I'll go back because I don't know if you could hear it, but I could hear Sam's phone going off.
I didn't hear it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so part of what I decided was that I wasn't being very successful in finding a husband in what I was doing. So I decided that I would start going to psychology conferences. And the reason I decided that was because I talked to Joe Bailey, about what he was learning, this new psychology, and he was seeing a friend of mine in therapy who actually was getting better, only he wasn't doing any of the things I thought he should be doing to get better. So it kind of irritated me, and I'd gone down to talk to Joe and tell him that he was totally out to lunch, and what he was teaching my friend was totally out to lunch, and he wasn't going to get better, and he was going to get worse, and blah, blah, blah. So he told me, look, if you want to learn more about this, go to the conference, and pushed me out of his room. And so I thought, well, it's a better place to meet men than bars. I'll go to the conference. So I signed up, and when I signed up for the first day, and the second day was optional. So I signed up for the second day as well, because I thought if I met a man the first day and I wasn't already signed up for the second day, it would look too obvious. So I signed up for both days, and actually, as it turned out, I was the first person to sign up for 2 days. So I did. And when I went to the conference, that day I went in late. I was tired. I was in a really low mood. And I was in the audience asking all of the argumentative questions of Dr. Mills. I was really kind of going after him. Only he would answer me, and his answers would go over my head. I didn't understand what he said. But I thought everybody else was either a PhD or an MD in the audience, that they were smarter than me. And they must understand, and it was just because I was stupid that I couldn't understand him. So I didn't follow it up with another argumentative question. I just come up with a new question. So at lunch, we all went to our mutual groups for lunch, and we were in the restaurant in the hotel, and I had my own clinic at that time with about 10 therapists that worked with us, and we were all sitting around together bad-mouthing this new stuff. It wasn't new, and what we did was good, and what this was not any better, blah, blah, blah. So I got up from the table, and this weird thing happened where I walked away from the table, and it was like everybody in the restaurant stopped in time except me. And I looked at the table, and I remember thinking, oh, weird. And then I turned around, and I looked out, and Dr. Mills had come, and we met at the door going out of the restaurant. And he said to me, he said, I didn't answer your questions very well, did I? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, you didn't. And so he started talking to me, and the feeling he talked to me from felt like velvet. When you caress velvet, it was just the softest, most beautiful feeling I had ever felt in my life. And I thought it was him making me feel that way. So now I'm interested in dinner big time, because I also found out through his stories that he was single. So I went back in the afternoon, and I thought, okay, I better listen. So if I go to dinner with him, I can have a conversation. He doesn't think I'm stupid. So I listened, and he started talking about being positive. And I thought, positive, I could be positive. Now, at the time, in working in therapy, being positive in therapy in 1981 was considered bad therapy. You were supposed to be connecting with the pathology of the person and really get in there with the negative. And that people that were positive were being surfacey and not getting at really what was wrong with people. So I thought, oh, I get it. I could be positive. That would be good. And believe me, I was the queen of negativity. So that in and of itself was a huge concession on my part. But then we had broken for a break in the afternoon. And I went up to a physician who was there. And at the time, I thought physicians were like one step down from God. And so, because they were smart, could, make it through medical school. And so I remember talking to this doctor, and I said, well, what do you think about this? He said, well, I think it makes good common sense. And I thought, well, if a doctor thinks this is common sense, maybe I should listen. So I went back in the afternoon, and I really listened to hear what he was saying. I didn't have any thoughts on my mind. I really wanted to hear what he was saying. And I had this huge shift where I realized that I was seeing my own thinking in life. And I started laughing because I thought all of the suffering I was doing over not being loved and not being able to find a man who would love me was because I thought I wasn't lovable. It had nothing to do with anybody but me. So me looking for a man who could love me was already a doomed case, because all I could see in men was that they didn't love me. So I was unlovable and therefore without a mate. So I laughed and I laughed and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Now, at the time, I had no men in therapy except for sex offenders. I had two sex offenders that were my clients. But other than that, I did not work with men. And it was interesting because as I let go of my negative thinking about men, and I saw that that was just my own insecurity, my own kind of thinking that they were responsible to make me feel bad or to make me feel good. That in my giving up that ability to do myself was putting this onus on them that they had no ability to do anything about. So I started realizing that men were not different from women, that they were the same as women. And as I saw this, it was really interesting because when I got that insight, I really got an insight about that, like, oh my gosh, yeah, maybe we think differently, but it's just thought. And that's how we're the same. We're just creating different thoughts. So I thought I could work with men. And I never told anybody about that, but that was in April. By June, half my caseload was male. And I was really able to connect with men and have a much better experience with them. And I really didn't do anything differently. I had an insight about myself and about how I saw men as being responsible for my happiness. Okay, now I thought I had it down pat, like that would be it. I'd find the man of my dreams. Well, I still didn't find the man of my dreams. I still kept finding men that were nicer. And I think to me, what I had to do is I had to kind of grow up all over again, because my adolescent years and my early years in my 20s were so affected by my insecure thinking that I needed to kind of do a redo and kind of grow up all over again. So I came up against lots of insecurities and lots of thoughts I had about relationships and lots of thoughts I had about myself and about what my partner should be like. It was like everybody I dated seemed to help me see something else that I needed to see differently. And it was really a chance for learning. And then I came to a part of my life where no men showed up at all, which was very different for me. I always had at least one or two in the background that were living farther away or were around anyway. And oh gosh, it was about 6 months. And I remember Joe and Bailey and I were still working together in a clinic, and I'd be like, oh, where are they going to show up? When are they going to show up? You know, like, this is not happening. I can't believe I can't even get a date for the something that we were doing or something. Then about 6 months later, I started dating again. So that men started coming in, and each man that came in was a little healthier than the one before. And in doing that, I started to see all of those beliefs that I had about myself and things that I saw that I placed love as a condition of a relationship, as a condition of my life, rather than as an experience within myself. And as a result of that, it's like I had to see all kinds of ways to be okay and secure as a person, no matter what happened with the relationship, no matter what happened with the man. And I had various very interesting experiences that came up during that time. But at the end of that time, I decided that I was going to move to Hawaii and start my life again. And I was in a relationship with a man at the time that I really cared about a great deal, but I just had a feeling that I had to move to Hawaii, and that that wasn't the way I should be going, and it wasn't really working out in the best way either. So I ended up moving to Hawaii, and 2 months after I moved here, I joined a racquetball club. And it was a funny thing because when I got to Hawaii, I kind of was bored with dating. Like, I just didn't even care if I went out on a date or not. It was like, I was totally happy the way I was. And it seemed to be like a bother to have to find a man, to have a relationship. I thought, I'm just not into it. So I was setting up my business in Hawaii, and I had very little money because of the money I had from my business in Minnesota. I was pouring into my business because my passion was about sharing the principles in the world. And I kept going by this health club, And I thought, no, I haven't got enough money. I can't join it. I can't join it. And I felt like this magnet was pulling me towards this health club. I said, okay, all right already. I'll go and check it out. So I went and checked it out, found out how much it was. Oh, it was $500 to join or something. I was like, oh no, I can't spend that. And I went out to my car, and while I was waiting, before I went to my car, there was a guy there sitting in the bleachers of the racquetball court. And I remember him because he had a scraggly beard. He had a t-shirt that had holes all over it. He was like at least 10 years older than me. And I'm thinking, he said, hey, what's your name? And I was like, oh, Chris. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe I am still picking up derelicts. I can't believe it. Like, what is wrong with me? So I just blew it off and went out to my car, and I sat in my car because I decided not to join because it was too much money. And I sat in my car and I had this like, join, don't join, join, don't join. And I thought, oh, I'll just put it on my credit card and join it. Obviously, there's something drawing me to this club. So I go in and I join. And about, maybe 2 months later, month and a half later, I was lifting weights in the back, and there were very few women that lifted weights at that time. So I was talking with the men that were back there just to talk to anybody. I knew nobody in Hawaii. It was like this social situation. And so this guy that was very friendly to me and very nice invited me to a party. And he invited me to this party, and I was like, a social event with somebody I didn't work with, because the women that I moved to Hawaii with, we were working together and living together, and it was too much together. And so I thought I could get away and just meet some new people. And that was like, wow, that was great fun. So I said, yeah, I'll come out. So in the meantime, it turns out that he goes to his best friend and tells him that he invited me to this party for his best friend, unbeknownst to me. So I come to the party, and I go over to this guy, and I said, how are you doing? And he introduces me to Sam. And I recognize him as the derelict that tried to pick me up when I was first in the racquetball club. And he said, he's a really nice guy. You should talk to him. And so I started talking to him, and he said he was with the union and did employee assistance referrals. And I was like, oh, referrals. I was totally interested in getting my business going. He's not my type. I don't even like him. But he had a really nice feeling. He was a really nice Hawaiian man, and he had this really nice feeling, but not my type. And so I'm talking to him, and he's walking me to my car, and I give him my card and tell him, if he knows anybody that needs referrals, we take referrals. And I thought, great, as I was made a business contact. So about 2 weeks later, I was at another party that they had frequently. They had parties on Thursday night at this racquetball club. And he was in a car watching me. And he tells me later that he told his friend that he was going to get a date with me. And at the end of the evening, he said, hey, we're going to have a racquetball tournament, the state racquetball tournament in Pearl City next weekend. You want to go with me? I said, sure, yeah, that sounds like fun. I can meet you over there. I got to work in the morning. And he said, no, I'll come pick you up. And I said, oh, no, I can drive over there. No worries. And he goes, no, I'll come pick you up. I said, up to you. You want to come pick me up? Come pick me up. So he comes over and picks me up, takes me back to the racquetball club. And then I'm like just hanging around, and he and his friend won the Masters doubles for the state. And I thought, oh, he's athletic. That's nice. And then he sat down at the Miss Pac-Man game, and he beat the high score on the machine. It's like, oh, he's got a pretty quiet mind. That's good. And then he took me to this place called Magic Island, which is at Ala Moana Beach in Honolulu, to watch the sunset. Now, I still have no idea that we're on a date until he reaches over and kisses me, and I went, oh, this is a date. And believe me, I never missed out that I was on a date before in my life. I maybe thought I was on a date and I wasn't, but I didn't know this before. So all of a sudden, all my thinking got turned upside down. And it's like all of the specifications, like he wasn't a lawyer. He was too old. He was overweight. He was all of these things, scraggly beard, you know, like totally not my type, just went out the window because he just had this really, really beautiful feeling that I was so drawn to. And that was it. I never dated another man. And I lived with him for about 4 years actually before we got married. So I did not get married until I was 39 years old. And at that time, we actually almost didn't get married because he was really insecure. He'd gotten divorced right before I met him. And he was really felt bad about needing to get divorced. He felt like it was kind of that he had failed as a man, that his marriage didn't work. And so he was like phobic about getting married again. So I would do things in our relationship. I said, how about if we have a ceremony, but we don't sign the papers? That way we'll be married for me and not married for you. And he goes, oh, that's ridiculous. Don't be stupid. So I finally told him, I said, look, I'm basically giving up having children to be your partner. So you got to either marry me. I'm not going to be unmarried and be 40. So you decide, you got to either marry me or don't. So that finally made sense to him. And so we ended up getting married that year. And that was in 1990, in December of 1990. So we've been married for 28 years this year. We'll be married. And yeah, he's still one of the most engaging human beings you'll meet in your life. And he still loves me more than any human being has ever loved me in my life. And I'm very grateful for him putting up with me, actually. He's a very mellow, very sweet man. And I've learned a lot from him about how to live in a beautiful feeling.
That's so great. As I remember you saying when we were writing the book that what impressed you was when you realized he loved you more than anyone had ever loved you. That really impressed me. Yeah.
Yeah, I could feel that. There was a difference in a feeling. And, the Hawaiians actually were the first principle-based people because they identified aloha as being a state of being that's within everybody. And that's really that state of mental well-being, that state of pure love, that state of aloha is what they call it. And the Hawaiians identified that early on. But what they didn't see was they didn't see the role that thought created as clearly. So that's kind of how it got lost. But the kahunas, actually in Sid's book, Second Chance, he talks about the kahunas as being the keeper of the secret. So they were the keepers of that knowledge that we live in aloha at all times. It's not a secret that everybody doesn't know, but it's keeping the truth of that everybody is that feeling of aloha at all times. And then we think, and whatever we're putting into thoughts, what's creating our experience. But for me, I think the biggest thing was realizing that I was love and that there was no man that could make me feel love. So although he didn't make me feel love, I could feel his depth of feeling so clearly. Like I could see that, and that was about me. That was about my being able to see that. Otherwise, I think his first wife probably would have stayed with him if she saw that. So that's kind of it's like I was lucky enough to have learned the principles, so I knew what I was looking for. And when I found it, I stuck with it. I was like, yeah. And I had lots of thoughts that tricked me into other directions, believe me. But I always knew that feeling there was something special and magical about it. Now, I remember at one time, this is another funny story, is when I was first learning it, I would guess it would be in 1982 or 83. And we were all of us, like all 10 of us that were into the principles at the time, were in Hawaii. I don't think you were there, Lori, but there was a few of us anyway that were in Maui, and Sid was in Maui. He wasn't living there yet, but he was visiting, and so we all met in Maui and hung out together. And I think he did a talk there. And we were at somebody's condominium, and he had just been to the island of Kauai. And you know, those postcard books that come together and you open them up and you see all the tourist spots on the island of Kauai. And so we were looking at these pictures, and there was one of the Fern Grotto, which is a place that people take a boat into and then they get married in the Fern Grotto. I was looking at that and I said, oh, wouldn't it be cool to get married in Hawaii? And he heard me say that. And he said, you want to get married in Hawaii? And he handed me the packet of postcards. He said, take this and think about it. And I have to laugh because not only did I end up getting married in Hawaii, but I married a Hawaiian. I lived in Hawaii for more years than I've lived anywhere else in my life. So it was pretty magical.
That's a wild story. That's a wild story. You know, I had a similar thing when feeling drawn to San Francisco. I would not, I don't know how I would have ever run into or even heard of Sid Banks back then and what he discovered. I don't know that I would ever have found that. So who knows? Maybe there is something about being drawn to a place. Who knows how it was?
You know, it's like the energy of life works through us, you know, and it's insight comes from within. That intelligence obviously has a way of working. That when we're, like for me, I just really want to be happy. I thought happiness came in the form of the right man, but I just really wanted to be happy. That was kind of the most important thing for me. And discovering that that's within you. Like I remember many times when I was first learning the principles, I could remember thinking, oh, I should have gone to that place, or oh, I knew I should have done that. Like after the fact, I knew I had the wisdom to do it. I didn't listen to it. But I didn't know why I knew it. So that's what the principles bring, is kind of an understanding of what that magical nature is. And I think that sometimes the more we think about the principles, the less we get away from really letting that feeling guide us and really letting the magic work through us. And trusting that somehow you'll get to the right place. Like who knew I'd have to move to Hawaii, for God's sake? I mean, I'm from Minnesota. My idea of a vacation was to go to northern Minnesota for vacation. I mean, Minnesotans generally, a lot of them never leave until they get old, and then they just go down to Arizona or Florida and come back for the winter. They don't even leave full time. But it's kind of interesting that just kind of being okay with not knowing why you're doing something and letting yourself move in that direction is a funny thing, because I see a lot of people trying to find a mate. They're trying to find the right person. They're looking, they're connecting online. There's all these things that happen, but gosh, you know, the old-fashioned way is still a very powerful way, is letting it come to you. You know, there's a story that the Hawaiians tell. In fact, my friend Judy Sedgman was at the center, the Museum for Native American People in Washington, D.C., and there was one of the navigators from the Hokulea. The Hokulea is a replica of the Hawaiian sailing vessels that were the boats that the Polynesians came to Hawaii from the west on, and they replicated this to prove that that could be done, because at the time people thought people came from the east to the west. And this man was telling a story about how the navigator, now you remember this is back in many centuries ago, like thousands of years ago, and they would teach navigation with a ball. So at some level they knew the earth was round. They had that insight, right? Now they didn't know that, but they knew it. They could see it. They could see the curvature of the earth, that they saw that. So now you're on a little island somewhere and you see this big ocean in front of you. You have no idea what's on the other side, where you're going. But yet they would get in these little bitty boats and they'd sail off and they'd find, like they found Hawaii. Hawaii is the most remote place on the planet. There's nothing that's close to it. And what he said was, he said, before they would get in their canoes and paddle, they would see where they were going in their mind's eye. And then they would get in the boat and the island would come to them. So that's kind of what I did in a sense, is I wanted to live in the feeling of aloha. I wanted to live in the most beautiful place that I could. And so why not live physically in the most beautiful place if I felt that way on the inside? So I moved to Hawaii, and then the man came to me. I didn't look for the man. And I think that's kind of the thing you want to realize, is that if you just listen to your wisdom, and your wisdom may guide you to go online. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad way, but if you're listening for a feeling, like for me, it's like I feel like I want to go to the grocery store, and I'll go like, I wonder why I'm here. Like we were on Saturday, we were we went to the farmer's market in Waimea. My niece was visiting, and I thought, gosh, it feels like I'm going to run into somebody here that I know. And then, boom, Crystal Sebastian shows up, and we got to meet her, and she got to see my niece and her kids who she knows, and it was kind of an interesting. It just happened that we happened to be there at the same time. Yeah, there's a synchronicity about life that I'm always just looking to see how things are going to work out, like what's going on, what's happening. Sometimes it's nothing, and other times I run into somebody that. Like I got my nails done. I ran into this really charming woman who, when she comes back from her trip to the mainland, we're going to get together and be friends. Like I just made a wish that I wanted some friends, some different friends. And suddenly I've met like 3 different people. You know, so it's just like letting it come to you rather than trying to search it out, trying to make it happen. And the other thing is realizing that men or women, whoever you're interested in, they cannot make you feel anything. It's not in having a relationship or having the right guy or having the right woman or whoever it is that you're interested in. It's really about you knowing that love is in you and it's in that. And when you connect at that level, it's a different kind of connection. And people will lose their connection with that also, but that just comes because they go back to their own thinking about what they really want. Because they don't know that initial falling in love and being in that feeling was coming from them. So their old thoughts start coming in, they start getting busy in their life, they start paying attention to kids or job or whatever, and that suddenly they don't feel that feeling anymore. So it's like, hey, I don't think I need you anymore in my life, or I don't want you anymore in my life because I don't feel good. But it had nothing to do with them in the first place.
Yeah, that's what happens, and why I think there's so much divorce in the world, because people start blaming their partner for their bad feelings, not realizing it's coming from their own judgment and their own expectations.
Right, but they also blame people for their good feeling. And so when they lose it, they think it's the other person's habits or insecurities or lack of attention or whatever they think it is. Yeah, it's either way. It's when you think that it's coming from the outside to you and you make it be about the relationship. It's like a thing, right? You make the relationship be a thing. It's really just you and whoever you're going through life with. That's it. That's your relationship. So the quality of your feeling is what's creating your experience of that. That's what we have in our book, isn't it, Lori? It's like just really looking at how, I think one of the quotes that is the favorite is that the only thing wrong with any relationship is negative thought. That's it.
Yeah. The way I think of it is we're always in relationship to our own thinking. That's
right.
Relationship.
Right.
The only relationship we have. Whether we're alone.
Extrapolating on that, you know, like what kind of person we should be in a relationship with, and you know, like all the specifics of things that we like or dislike. But those are just all, I mean, honestly, My husband and I are like Mutt and Jeff. You know, for those of you that don't know, that was a cartoon character. We couldn't be more different. I like to, you know, dress up and put makeup on and look nice, and he's very comfortable in shorts and slippers. And you know, I like to go out and talk to people. He likes to be home and not talk to too many people. We're totally different. I mean, we have nothing really in common except that feeling of love. And he's very supportive and loving of me, and I'm supportive of him and loving of him. And we do the best we can do to live in that feeling and to keep that magic alive.
That's it. I love how you talk about the aloha feeling. That's it. That's what, it's the only thing to look for.
Yeah. Yeah.
That feeling.
Yeah.
Within ourselves.
And you know, believe me, it's really easy to get tricked because your thinking can create like, oh, this is the man, I love it. This is the one. And yeah, it's finding somebody that can go deeper, that you just know. It's like, I always thought especially after I learned the principles, when my experiences didn't work out, when my relationships didn't work out, when things just didn't happen in the right way, that I was being protected. Like there was somebody that would be better for me. There was somebody that would be a healthier match for me. That if it didn't work out, it wasn't because I wasn't lovable. It wasn't because the person was being mean to me. It just wasn't meant to be. Wasn't not that I think that there's a script somewhere that says that Praseeth should marry Samson Pu'umahialani, but it just wasn't going to be a good fit. The feeling wasn't right. So I was being protected from something that would be harder to get out of later. And as it, you know, it's funny because now I look back and 4 of the people that I was really in love with and wanted to marry are all dead. They've all died, and I'd be a widow right now had I stayed with them. And you know, it's like really interesting to find out like why things broke up. One man I broke up with, and he found me once on LinkedIn, and so I was laughing because he actually I saw his name come up, so I clicked and said, you know, hi, how are you? And he had no memory of me. So and I thought, oh, here all this time I'm thinking like I've left this guy, you know, feeling miserable because I moved to Hawaii, and he was in love with me, and I walked out on him. What a bad person I am. And then I found out he didn't even remember who I was. So, you know, it's like things that our mind makes up at the time have nothing to do with the long-term effect of what happens to people. It, you know, it's just continually cracks me up of how really the more you kind of take life impersonally, the easier it is, the less you suffer. And when we take someone else's experience with us personally, then we suffer.
Oh, that is an important point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Easy to lose track of that.
Yeah.
The feeling alerts it, because when we take things personally, it feels terrible. Mm-hmm. That's the alert that we're going off in a tangent in our own head.
Right. We're taking ourselves too personally also. You know, it's like it becomes like we get judgmental and we get just caught up in that normal negative thinking that people tend to do when they're relationship searchers. You know, and when they're like, I have a friend from high school who married her high school sweetheart. They were in a relationship since we were in the 10th grade, and they got married the summer after our freshman year, and they've now been married over 50 years, or almost 50 years anyway. Yeah, I think it's good, coming up on, must be 48 years they're married.
Wow.
And I, you know, I see them when I go back to Minnesota, and honestly, they're still in love with each other. They still have a really beautiful feeling with each other. They have 2 kids that grown up and become very successful. They've lived their whole life in a beautiful feeling together. And they've done very well. They're very happy people. And gosh, you know, it's like, and then I know other people that have been married 3-4 times, you know, that are still looking for somebody to do it for them. But it's that kind of like settling in and settling down that means you stop the search for in the outside world for love. And whether you're searching in spiritual teachings, or you're searching in men or women, or you're searching outside of yourself for that feeling, you're just looking in the wrong place. Just got to turn around and realize you're okay the way you are, and just be happy and know that that's more than a lot of people ever get. And if you can find that, you're much more likely to find somebody who wants to live in that feeling. That for me was what it became like. I just didn't care if I dated anybody, but if I did date somebody, I was going to date somebody that valued living in that healthy state of mind. Like, I didn't want to marry a person who was a workaholic. I didn't want to marry a person who was life was about living on the edge. I wanted, they didn't have to know much about it, but they had to value it and like it. And that's what I got. And as it turned out, my husband, after we met, he became the equivalent of a legal lawyer, of a labor lawyer, sorry. That he did all contract negotiations, he did third strip grievances, he went up against other attorneys all the time in interactions with the company that he was the head of the union for. So he actually became all the things that I was looking for. I just couldn't see it at the time.
You just never know.
You just never know. You just have to keep going with the feeling and just let it come through you. Don't get turned around. And we all, believe me, we all get turned around. We all get our feelings hurt. We all take things personal with what people do. But gosh, when I was first learning this, it was like, oh my God, it's happening again. And I just knew that I needed to keep that good feeling. That the more I did that, the stronger I got, and the less able I was to feel hurt, get my feelings hurt. And the more I realized that I was love, the less I looked for love.
Right. So, there's so much in all that you've said, Chris. I hope people listening will actually listen to this interview, you know, because each time you can hear something new, something fresh for yourself. That's the point, that people will see their own insights from the.
I often think that the reason I went through what I went through is because I had great stories. So, you know, it's it's like you're going through your life doing what you're doing, and as long as you're trying to get toward the general direction of living in love, you just got to see the humor and laugh about it, and know that it'll change in a moment. Like, change in a moment. Like, I have clients that come in and they're miserable. Oh my gosh, I'll never live. My husband left me, blah, blah, blah. And, a couple of months later, they're like arguing with a new man that they've fallen in love with, So it's relationships. My girlfriend said, relationships are like the bus. If you're standing at the bus stop, another one always comes along. But if you're not out of your house and you're waiting for one to show up at the front door, you're going to wait a long time.
Right.
You just have to be out in life and sharing that feeling. And the more you share that feeling and you live in that feeling, people will be drawn to that feeling. And that's what you're looking for, is someone who likes that feeling. I remember my husband, when we were first dating, it was maybe the third date we were on, and he looked at me and goes, "Do you always smile?" And I was like, I guess, I don't know. I'm not monitoring myself, but I thought it was funny because I just didn't get mad. He was always used to people being mad and angry, and I was like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. So, there's just little things like that when you're paying attention to living in that feeling, you shine to people. People are like, drawn to that. And the other thing that happens is that you just like people come into your reality because you're living at a different level of consciousness. So you're going to run into different people that live at a higher level of consciousness. So to me, it's like that's the fun of it. It's just see the game in it for yourself, and you know, just remember the illusion to think that your happiness comes from anything outside of yourself is a big one. But it's just
I've said for a long time, I'd much rather be single and happy than coupled and be with someone who's up and down and pretty miserable. It's much better to be alone and happy.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think everybody, if they settle down, but when people, it's like the best feeling you can get is kind of that feeling of excitement or adrenaline rush, or that like when you first fall in love, that kind of lust love combination where you feel connected. It's like if that's the only way you know how to feel good, then your old thinking will click back in and you start thinking again, and pretty soon you start creating a bad feeling, and that's what you want to be awake to. It's like it's how you bring your past with you, how you recreate your lack of feeling connected to love. Because it's funny, because when we connect on the inside, we feel connected on the outside. When we're looking to the outside to feel connected on the inside, we always feel like we're separate.
That's so true. So true. Oh, this has been so great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday to do this for us.
No worries, Lori. Thank you so much for asking. I really appreciate it. I hope somebody gets something out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I did. Thanks again so much. I'm going to stop the recording, and we can chat a little bit when I stop.